that what they did against Georgia Tech, a running team, and Wisconsin against Jonathan Taylor kind of proves something. So I'm glad you kind of see some of my points. But I figured, hey, what the hell? I'm going to be different a little bit since I have them all bunched up. Michigan State, I have them power rated right by there, but I have Wisconsin right ahead of Michigan State. A lot of people are down on Wisconsin, but there's a lot of things that people didn't know about what happened with Wisconsin last year. Obviously, Quintez Cephas, they lost a receiver to that legal trouble with the girls. I don't know, allegedly, obviously, the sexual assault, which is terrible if that's true. And the thing about that, I guess one of the girls was AJ Taylor, their wide receiver, another wide receiver's on and off girlfriend. There's just a mess right there. And then there's something else about what happened with Wisconsin with Hornibrook and his concussions. Now, this is all unconfirmed, but you've never seen this in the media. There was a huge dispute between Hornibrook and his offensive line, Edwards, and something happened with possibly one of their girlfriends. There was no getting along between the offensive line and the quarterback last year, which I found strange, and I found that shocking. And you saw the regression Hornibrook had throughout from the year before to last year. It was like two different guys. And if you want to just Google Edwards and Hornibrook and see what you find out about what happened there last year. But what they do return is obviously Jonathan Taylor, one of the Heisman favorites. They do return Danny Davis, a receiver, AJ Taylor, Garrett Groshek as running back, Jake Ferguson at tight end. And they have a new quarterback. They have Jack Cohn, who obviously did extremely well that last game that they played against Miami in the bowl game. He looked poised. I'm not sure if he's going to win it because they have a guy named Graham Mertz, who is a 4-star recruit who chose Wisconsin. Guys, Alabama and Clemson called this guy. He chose Wisconsin, which was awesome for that. He enrolled early in December last year and already has a semester under him, similar to a man we know in Clemson that did the same thing. Obviously, no comparison here to Trevor Lawrence right now, but as a Badger fan, that's just kind of something that excites you a little bit. Now, there's a lot of questions. Is this quarterback going to be good or bad? The defense lost a ton of production on the linebackers. They had literally freshmen playing defensive line. They had offensive linemen playing D-line at the end of the year. They lost their best pass rusher, Garrett Rand, before the season even started. They're at 14.5 to 1 to win the Big Ten. I think that's value right there. If you want, you could take them, and if you took a little bit on Minnesota, take a little bit on Wisconsin, because this whole Big Ten might be decided that game at the end of the season at Minnesota. That way you have both. If you don't want to touch them against Michigan State, Ohio State, you can take Minnesota 5 to 1, Wisconsin 4 to 1 to win the Big Ten West. But those are my plays that I like, and I think they have a great shot. Obviously, 14.5 to 1 and 71. There's plenty of room to hedge right there if they do play that tough Ohio State, Michigan State towards the end of the season. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think there's a lot of different ways you can go with Wisconsin. I mean, like you said, some serious injury problems on the defensive line. The good thing for them, based on that, though, is they had a lot of youngsters that got playing time that's going to make them better this year than what they would have been based on, some of the veterans weren't able to play. So here come the youngsters, and some of those youngsters are going to play again. I think Wisconsin only sacking opponents 19 times last year is a stat that really stood out to me. Mm-hmm. No pass rush, couldn't stop the run. You look at a team that's been the 3 years previous, 3.1, 3.2, and 3.3 yards per carry allowed. And then last year they go to 4.4. That's a pretty dramatic drop off. 51st in the country in yards per play allowed. And this Wisconsin team had been in the top 5 or 6 defensively in yards per play allowed many years in a row. I don't think the defense is going to go back up to the top 5 or 6. I do think that 51st in the country is too low. They're going to be significantly better than that. I would expect them to be a top 25 defense. To me, the quarterback position is really the key in what you think of their upside here, because look, Wisconsin ran for 6.22 yards per carry with no passing game last year. Mm-hmm. I mean, the receivers are back. Hornibrook was really bad last year. Whether it was, I have heard about that team drama. These are college kids. That kind of drama can affect their performance. So I think that, Hornibrook transferring out looked strange at the time, but maybe the writing was on the wall also that Graham Mertz is that good. I would think that Mertz will end up with the majority of the playing time here. If he's as good as all the scouts say, I don't think you can keep him behind Cohen for very long. I think Mertz is really the future of this program. And I would say that if the passing game is just decent, this offense is going to be really difficult to stop. I mean, I think this Wisconsin offense will definitely be better than last year's offense. I think the defense is clearly going to improve from what it was last year. The issue I have with Wisconsin is they have a really tough schedule. Yeah. I mean, a really, really tough schedule. I'll say it this way. I can't take the under on a season win total with Wisconsin because I expect more from them. I think that there's too much talent there to be what they were last year. Having said that, I'm not excited to take the over based on the schedule that I see in front of them. I lean to the over. I don't think I'll bet the season win total here, though.
So, I agree with you. I actually have it at 8.5 where the season win total was because of this tough schedule. I have Minnesota at 9, so I easily went over 7.5. Gave that out to premium subscribers long ago, but 8.5 is probably right for Wisconsin. I mean, you got to play Michigan State, you get them at home. You got to play Michigan, you get them at home. But then you have at Ohio State, Iowa, at Nebraska, at Minnesota. It's definitely tough. So Wisconsin's could be, right in the middle again, or if everything that we said about last year was just the off year. They have a very good shot. I think, like you said, I agree. Jack Cohn is going to be on a short leash those first few games, and Graham Mertz will fit right in last year if that happens. So 100% agreement there. Moving on to Michigan State is my next one, and like I said, I have Michigan State right around Wisconsin and Minnesota power rated. They returned a lot of offensive production. They returned, I believe I have them at 78% production. They returned their full defensive line, which is great. But one thing I didn't like about them last year is their offense was at 4.62 yards per play, and their defense held opponents to 4.54, which was nice, but that's only a 0.08 net there. Brian Lewerke, I guess, was injured last year. He had shoulder problems, so maybe that's the excuse. But they have Connor Haywood at running back, Ladarius Jefferson at the second running back. When it comes to returning production, I like it when there's obviously a very good offense returning, but their offense wasn't that good, and they're returning these guys. So I'm questioning this. Their season win totals at 7.5. I have them at 8. They lost big guys like L.J. Scott and Justin Lane last year. I like their easy non-conference schedule, but I'm going to pass on this one as well. What are your thoughts?
I like Michigan State more than you do here, and it's always good when we have some disagreement. I think you and I agree more than we disagree. I like Michigan State because I think that their offense improves at least somewhat, and I don't think their offense has to be that good. This defense is really, really good. I think the front seven, Michigan State, you could make a really good argument that defensive line is the best in the country. Linebackers really good. Front seven just in general here, at least top 2 or 3 in the country for Michigan State. Nobody's going to be able to run on them. The secondary is at least pretty good. And when you get kind of pass rush that they're going to get, then the secondary gets a lot of help as well. I think Michigan State's defense is tremendous. Offensively, Lewerke was injured last year. He actually has shown some signs of being decent at times. Last year at the end of the year was a mess. I'm going to assume that Michigan State is a decent amount better on offense. I don't think they'll be great on offense. I still think they'll be involved in a lot of low-scoring games, but I think this season win total is a little bit too low here for Michigan State. I do like the season win total over the total.
Yeah, I'm definitely not taking them under, but they didn't show me quite enough last year, so definitely fair enough. You're right. They have that big defensive line coming in. Everyone's talking about it. Hopefully that comes to fruition. I remember that Nebraska game. They lost 6-9 at Nebraska. Well, it was snowing that game too. So it was Nebraska. I thought it was set up perfectly for Michigan State to win that, and they still lost it at a snowy day, supposedly shutting down. That should have helped shut down Scott Frost. So, we'll see what happens there. Definitely not going under, but I'm not going over. Iowa's my next team, a man. 13.5. I have them around the power rating-ish. Kirk Ferentz sitting there at coach. Nate Stanley. They return their quarterback. You got to like that. Brandon Smith is a receiver coming back. They do have a few new running backs, Torrin Young and Mekhi Sargent. New tight end, Sean Byer. Is this guy going to be like Hawkinson or Noah Fant? That's the big question. 9-4 last year was a great record. 8-5 against the spread. They have a medium schedule-ish to me. Their season win total is at 7.5. I actually have them at 8.5, but that isn't quite enough to get me to the dance with this one. I need a little bit more of a margin than that. 25-1 to win the Big Ten, 150-1 to win the championship. I think Iowa, they lost a lot of people on offense. You know, they lost their left guard, they lost their center, Linderbaum. I hate how they lost those awesome tight ends, replacing a running back. I do like Nate Stanley, but on their defense, I only see 4 returning starters. That's not quite enough for me, my man. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Iowa's a tough team to predict every year. I mean, you look at some of the years that Iowa was expected to be really good, they've disappointed. Some of the years that they weren't supposed to be as good, they've been really good and pick up, 11 or 12 wins or something. So I think Kirk Ferentz is a good coach, definitely a very good coach. I think their defense is just, that they're at least going to be pretty good on defense every year. It always says they have a good defensive coordinator. They have a good scheme, plenty of good linebackers always at Iowa. I think defensively, the thing that's going to help them a lot is A.J. Epinesa. I don't know if I pronounce his name correctly or not, but he's a tremendous defensive end, great pass rusher. I think we'll see really big things out of him this year. To me, like I said, Phil Parker, a really excellent defensive coordinator, underrated by most people. They're not going to be 7th in yards per play allowed again this year like they were last season, but I do think Iowa will be good on defense. Offensively, Nathan Stanley threw 25 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. They were only 91st in the country in yards per play on offense. To me, that's kind of disappointing when you had that, receivers and tight ends. I mean, you have 2 tight ends as good as they had in Hawkinson and Fant. You would think that you could do better than that. Their offensive line was a little bit disappointing. I mean, we've seen Iowa offensive lines be dominant in the past, and they couldn't really run the ball last year. I think they need to be able to run the ball more this year. If you look at their stats from last year, Iowa threw the ball 45.54% on offensive plays. So they were almost 50-50 throwing the football. That's not normal for Iowa. Usually they're a team that's, 35 to 40% of the time they're going to throw the football because they like to run. I would expect more run-heavy package this year. Can they run the ball or can they not? I think is the biggest key here to the Iowa win total. I would lean over here. The problem is I think I'm kind of similar to you here. I think that the juice is so high. You've got over 7.5 minus 140. I mean, minus 140 on a win total is not something that intrigues me too much. So I think Iowa, if you like them and think that they have a decent upside, I think the way I'd go with this is take them to win the Big Ten West. 5 Dimes has that at plus 475. I think that's a decent price on Iowa. I think that they have the upside potential to do that. I don't see taking minus 140 on over 7.5.
I get you. At Wisconsin and at Nebraska kind of hurts that a little bit, but I always love the Iowa State game they play. That tells me a little bit more about the Big 12 and the Big 10 whenever that game airs. So I'm always excited for that one. That one's a must watch for me at all times. Yeah, we agree on this one. Let's move into Nebraska, which is the next one I have close to this bunch. 12-ish to me. I think that they improved this year for sure. They returned about 59% of offensive production, 55% of defense. Their defense was terrible last year, giving up 5.81 yards per play, but their offense moved the ball well. Under Adrian Martinez, their quarterback, 6.3 yards per play. People are pretty high in Nebraska this year. They returned J.D. Spielman, Cade Warner, Mikhail Wilbon, Jack Stoll at tight end. They were only 4-8 last year, and this was my biggest play last year, under 6.5. That cashed actually by the 6th game. So right, the 6th, 7th game. So that was my first season win total that cashed. I knew that they were overhyped, but are they getting overhyped again? That's a big question here because their season win total is at 8 already. And I think that's already starting to move up a little bit, or at least juice to the over. Scott Frost has got a lot of respect, and what he did at Central Florida was absolutely amazing. But this is the Big Ten. There's some